Welcome once again to another edition of the Brattlecast. Always something interesting when I sit down, and I'm Jordan Rich, when I sit down with Ken Gloss from the very famous Brattle bookshop in Boston on West Street. And many people take trains, and many people love trains, but many people don't walk into a studio with a bunch of train pamphlets and schedules and things from all over the world, all over the country. What did you bring today, my friend?
Well, I recently went to an estate and we bought a collection of timetables.
Okay.
Probably going back over 100 years, some of them, but railroad timetables. Now, on the surface of it, it seems like, so what? They're old timetables. Well, we got about 6,000 of them. So, right now I have a lot of railroad timetables.
Okay.
And a lot of them are very plain. In other words, it tells you this train goes from here to here. It goes at that time and this time, which actually is a very interesting thing about the railroads that I'm hopefully we'll talk about a little in this podcast. But one of the biggest pushers for early travel in the United States, especially the late 1800s, the early 1900s, and still, were the railroads, because they wanted people to go out and see the country. And it was one of the first times that you could relatively easily get from Boston to San Francisco, to the great sites, to Niagara Falls.
Yeah, it opened up the country in a whole new way.
It opened up the country, but as it opened up the country, not just for business, which of course was a very important part, but they wanted people to tour, to get on. And a lot of what the railroads did is they built hotels around the country at big tourist areas. Now, they happened to own the land and the hotel, and even more wanted to get out. And they put out gorgeous posters to try to get people to travel. Now, those posters are very collectible, but they also can tend to be expensive. And one other thing about a distraction or a problem of being a poster collector or maybe any kind of art is at a certain point you don't have any wall left.
Of course.
So within these 6,000 railroad timetables I got, we went through and we picked out some of the more colorful ones. There's the one you have in your hand now is Pikes Peak.
Via the world-famous Cog Road.
Yeah,
Yes,
and
indeed.
then the New York Central telling you to go fishing.
Thousand Islands
Yeah.
and Rideau Lakes.
And here's one, the Boston Elevated Railway, to tell you to come into Boston.
Goodness sakes, look at that.
They can be a lot of fun. And, well, here's one. You almost look like you go into a Broadway play. And
Kansas City Southern Lines, the Southern Belle.
And then what also happens, I've been showing you the covers, but Lake George, it has a beautiful old wooden motorboat, but then when you open it up, it has a big fold-out picture of Lake George.
My grandkids just came back from there.
Well,
I don't know if they took the train. I don't think so. But
probably not.
Probably not.
But these are very collectible, and the ones that have maps, the ones that sort of are tourist guides along with timetables, people just love. And they go back really. The railroad started in the United States in the 1830s. They were more get this from here to here, industrial products, cattle, farm goods, and so on. But then after the Civil War in particular, they started getting to be more travel-oriented. And, of course, everybody likes graphics. So at a price that you can buy these travel posts, the timetables, they might be $10, $25, maybe a upper end of $50 as opposed to the posters, which could be $1,000 to $3,000.
And there are many people listening who are railroad and train aficionados, so they love this stuff.
A lot of them. Here's one, Ottawa and Montreal, via the lakes in Ottawa River, Thousand Islands. Marquette shows someone out on the lake. Now, here's one that's obviously a little bit more modern, but, I mean, It's a beautiful picture of a train, and you also see the fashion of almost the people going on the train.
Sure.
So I just found it fascinating going through these and seeing the different places. Now, One of the things, though, that when you collect timetables, a lot of people don't realize this, but one of the big problems the railroads had, especially when they first started, but particularly when people started really using, was time. It wasn't uniform. In other words, the idea of having time zones and of daylight saving and Eastern or Standard Time wasn't the same everywhere. So you could be in one town and it would be on this time, and you could go to the next town and it might be an hour difference. And some of it might even be a little more off. It might even be of the half hour. So one of the people and one of the companies that really pushed and really got the United States to be a standard time were railroads. Because can you imagine trying to figure out if the railroad was leaving Boston and if the time wasn't standard, that if you were maybe going to Cleveland, it would be one time, but if you were going to Columbus, it would be a different time. And if you had to catch the train and the Boston said it was going to reach there at a certain time, but actually in that town it was a different. So there was a huge, huge movement to standardize and uniform
that
time.
Makes so much sense, and it probably led to the famous math problem. If a train leaves Chicago at 10 o'clock and then arrives. So these are from different eras. They probably stopped doing these in the last couple of decades. The printing is a thing of the past, right?
Well, the printing, but what happened is, and this person, we collected these were all on railroads, but there are people who collect ships. And ships can tend to be very fancy because the cruise ships, the cruise liners, they were really trying to promote that. Now, of course, in a way, they usually went greater distances. But just think about post-World War II, around the 50s, when the airlines started push, and you could see people with white napkins being served really good food. Yeah,
totally different era.
I was going to say
totally different era. But what's interesting too about these is the artistry and the care taken to deliver a message and to really lure you in for the adventure.
Well,
of the train.
And not only the artistry, but what you can almost see is the ones from the late 1800s have one type of artistry and one type of. Here's one. You have. 3 express trains from Fort Wayne and the Pennsylvania line, 1878. But then you have one that 1940s, and you can start getting into the new trains, the Art Deco. And then you have sort of the Adirondacks, so you get the old camping. You almost think of Theodore Roosevelt and that period. Here's one from 1943, Meeting Your Travel Needs, and a lot of the people there, a few of them are all suit and tie, and I think I might even see one in uniform, but also the porters are all black.
Of course. It's a touch of history that you don't often think about.
It's a touch of history, and boy, I tell you, you can go fishing and hunting and you can catch some pretty big fish as far as this is. Like I say, one of my favorites here, though, is Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes, Pikes Peak. You probably still have the Cog Railway.
Well, I took the train from Williams, Arizona, into the Grand Canyon, and it's a throwback, and it makes sense. It's the sort of almost the tail end of Route 66, and it's a very big part of the promotional touring of Grand Canyon. You take the train. Well,
and one of the things that you also, the way collectors like these, that people like them for the particular railroad, Kansas City and L.A., the Fort Wayne in Pennsylvania. So if it's local, they like that. If people collect just souvenirs and not even caring that it's railroad, but a beautiful image of Pikes Peak, maybe they collect old motorboats. That's a gorgeous picture of an old motorboat. So there are a lot of reasons, but it's really the graphics that grab you. Now, the other 4,000, 900 or 5,000 that we have that are much plainer, those will be a whole lot tougher sell.
Yeah.
Now,
I would imagine.
And what also was happening is the people who collected old railroad memorabilia, they're not collected as much as there aren't as many of those old collectors.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of those old collectors are the ones selling their collections now. So it's the graphics that you have to really sell. The general idea and the history of the railroad and where these people were collecting because they wanted to know, okay, for historical reasons, when would this line be going from here to here? How long did it take? Well, a lot of that has dropped out because you can just Google that now.
Exactly.
And that information is there, but a picture is worth 1,000 words. And, I'm going to look forward to it because we just sorted them. And this took me about 2 minutes to pull these 10 or 15. But one of the things that I'll enjoy doing when I get back to the store is going through and getting these priced. But then maybe we'll make a window out of it. We'll find the ones that can open up to larger maps, show the scenes. Maybe we'll find an old atlas that has a lot of the railroad lines that are going through it. I think it would be fascinating.
All aboard, as they say. Once again, you bring in these things that don't relate to other things, but they're all related to books and reading and paper and all the great stuff that we talk about. I'm thrilled that we were able to do this. That was great.
Well, and one of the things that's great about books and book reading and book history is it covers every subject you can ever think of.
Absolutely.
So maybe you have no interest in railroads, but maybe the airplanes, or maybe you have no interest in that, but you like knitting.
Or big fish.
Or big fish, or whatever it is. There's something for everyone, and everyone who wrote a book wrote it because they thought somebody would be interested.
Yeah, even the man and probably the woman in some cases who devised these pamphlets should be happy to know in a generation or two ago that we're talking about them. Not them particularly, but their pamphlets, their work.
I would love to sometime run into an estate of somebody who was an artist or designer of one of these and had a lot of the background. Now, see, you just made me want something else.
There you go. It's all part of what we call the Brattlecast. Go to brattlebookshop.com. Ken, as always, thank you.
Well, thank you. I love doing this with you, Jordan.